meeting to order at 4 p.m. Today is September 8th. If Kyle, you could take roll call for Plan Commission members.
Mayor Blazer,
Here.
Alder Austin,
Here.
Lee Tao. Let me check online. Absent. Eric Doven,
Here.
Susan Feith. Absent. Ben Goodrow
Present.
and Thaddeus Kubishak. Absent. That is enough for a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on. Item number 1 is approval of the reports from the August 1st, 2022 Plan Commission meeting. What are your wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the report. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion carries. Item 3 is Argyle L. Jackson, extraterritorial CSM request for a certified survey map approval for the creation of 2 lots, of which are under 5 acres in the town of Saratoga at 8950 South State Highway 13 South, parcel ID 1800159. Kyle?
I don't know if you wanted me to touch on item 2, the Vanderwall update. I don't have.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped that. So yeah, why don't you go back to item 2?
Yeah, I don't have much of an update other than they're wrapping up the surveys and hopefully should have a preliminary draft plan before us in the next month. If that's in a form good enough for us to present to Plan Commission, that is our plan, to do that draft plan hopefully in October, possibly November again if there are several concerns and changes needed. And then for any member of the public that's interested in the recovery and redevelopment plan for the paper mill, they can go to the community development website on wirapids.org and view that project page with all the previous updates and other information. That's all I have for that item. If you want me to roll into item 3, I
Yes,
can
please.
do so.
Yes.
So before you, I'm going to talk about 3 and 4, if that's all right. They're very similar. Both of them are extraterritorial plat reviews to create 2 lots, again, in our extraterritorial plat area outside of the city. The first item is about 2.5 miles out of the city. The second one's about 1.5 miles out of the city. They're both to, again, create a residential lot to develop, and both, I think, are in areas where it's appropriate to do so. The lot sizes are appropriate when you take into consideration the surrounding lot sizes, and therefore staff would recommend approval of both the extraterritorial CSM for item number 3 and item number 4.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll read item 4 just so the public knows. Item 4 is Joe Winkleman, extraterritorial CSM, request for a certified survey map approval for the creation of 2 lots, one of which is 5 acres within the town of Grand Rapids at 1721 48th Street South, County Parcel ID 0700677A. Any questions? You get to sit next to me, Susan. Any questions on those items?
I don't know if we need to do them separate, but I'll make a motion for item number 3 for approval.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion and a second for item 3. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion carries. And item 4?
I'll make a motion for approval for item number 4.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve item 4. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries. We're on item number 5 would be Carol Winrow Brody, 22-000952, request for a site plan review to construct greenhouse structures and site improvements at 2320 Samson Street, parcel ID 3411091. Kyle?
Go ahead, Carrie.
Yes, thank you, Chair Blazer, members of the commission. So the item before you is from Carol Winrow Brody, who is requesting site plan review to construct greenhouse structures at 2320 Samson Street. Just for some background information, she has been operating a greenhouse at her home, which is across the street at 2331 Samson Street. And that greenhouse has been in operation since 1961. This property before you is for 2320 Samson Street, and it is zoned R2 mixed residential. Just last week, the Zoning Board of Appeals approved a use variance to operate a greenhouse business at the 2320 Samson Street location. And so now the applicant is requesting site plan review to construct 3 hoop houses on the site. And new commercial structures require site plan review per Chapter 11 zoning. This rendering to the left on the slide is a site plan. There is an existing greenhouse and an existing shed on the property. They are proposing 1 greenhouse to be located in front of the existing greenhouse and then 2 on the sides with the long side facing the side property lines. So this proposal does meet all dimensional standards. Vehicle ingress and egress will remain unchanged. There are 2 curb cuts that access that site currently. There is adequate space for 6 parking spaces. Our zoning code does allow for uses in this category to remain gravel, which the applicant plans to do. Some landscape requirements are met through existing landscaping. There's quite a lot of landscaping on site now. So we are proposing that some of that existing landscaping meet the foundation requirements and that the balance be met through the plants that will be displayed for sale seasonally. However, there is no frontage landscaping. And the zoning code does require that that landscaping be planted within a certain distance of that front property line. So to meet that, we are proposing that 2 new frontage trees be planted, and then also that the trash dumpster be screened from public view on the 3 sides that are visible from the public, which is the front and the 2 sides. And here's some photos of the property just to give you a better sense of it. The one on the left is not, the lower left-hand corner is the greenhouse that has been in operation across the street. The other 3 photos are of this lot. The bottom one is kind of a centered view, and then the top are the ends of the lot. So we are proposing approval with conditions, which include that the trash container be appropriately screened from public view. We're also proposing that a landscape plan be submitted that includes those 60 points of frontage landscape points, which is 2 deciduous trees per our code. Any outdoor storage shall be screened from public view, but we are saying that similar to other businesses, if there are items available for sale, like plants or other landscaping related things, that those would be able to be free of screening. Outdoor lighting is subject to the standards that other businesses would be subject to, which is that it cannot exceed 0.1 foot candles at the neighboring residential uses. All applicable permits, including building permits, shall be obtained, and then that community development staff shall have the authority to approve minor modifications to the plans. And I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? The applicant is here if you do have any questions. If not, what are your wishes?
I'd recognize the applicant if they'd like to speak.
Would you have any, do you want to speak at all? Or if you can help her with the mic.
Like to add or say?
What?
He just asked if you'd like to speak.
Oh, if I'd like to speak? No, just thank everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve, subject to staff recommendations.
I'll second.
So a motion is second to approve pending or with staff recommendations. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion carries. Item 6 is PB2 Architect and Engineering, public hearing and action on a request for a conditional use permit amendment to expand the retail use by constructing an addition onto Walmart at 4331 A Street South, parcel ID 264. I guess as in the past, we'll have Kyle or the planning department introduce the item, we'll open a public hearing, and then we'll have a conversation, if I remember. Kyle
Go ahead, Carrie.
or Carrie?
Okay, so I just want to, right away, I just want to point out there is an error on the first page of the staff report under findings of fact. So it says currently a 217,290 square foot discount store exists. It is 208,994, and with the proposed 8,296 square foot addition, it would be the 217,000, just to clarify that, if anyone was wondering about that. So this is a proposed addition. The property is a little over 20 acres. The current Walmart site and the Walmart was built in 2000. The parcel is located within the B2 General Commercial District, and retail sales of more than 40,000 square feet is conditionally permitted in the B2 district. So this is a proposed 8,296 square foot expansion of the retail building, and this requires an amendment to the original conditional use permit approval. So this is a conditional use permit amendment. And then, as I said, the expansion will bring the total building size to 217,290 square feet. So the reason for this addition is, just like many businesses right now, they are growing their e-commerce business and their customer pickup areas, as many businesses are. And so this is to accommodate that better. So there is an expansion proposed in the form of a building addition, and then 45 existing parking spaces will be marked customer pickup only. So in reviewing this, the size of the parcel is adequate, the property is suitable, and the use is consistent with the surrounding land uses. The use is kind of just a conversion of existing use of retail use. Ingress and egress parking and circulation will be minimally impacted. They will lose a little bit of parking, but they still meet the parking standard. And then some of the existing parking will be marked as customer pickup only. Landscaping and architectural review requirements have been met. They are proposing some pretty substantial planters adjacent to the pickup area. They have added architectural elements that are similar to the front facade to give a more pedestrian scaled and kind of a heightened design on that side of the building. They are proposing relocation of a lighting pole, and they're still kind of reviewing how that impact will be, but they will need to provide us with information to make sure that that relocation still meets the lighting standards. So this is the front facade at the top and that portion on the left side. And then the left elevation, you can see the addition portion on the right. There will be two kind of metal canopies, two ramp areas where goods can be wheeled out in carts to vehicles, and then some additional architectural elements to make it similar to the front elevation. And these are some photos. They're doing some facade work right now of their existing facade. You can see it's kind of scraped off right now. And that picture on the upper right is the portion that will be the addition. Just a reminder, just because this is a conditional use permit amendment, we just kind of wanted to revisit the changes in 2017 with Wisconsin Act 67. Conditional uses are conditionally permitted, and conditions can be added that the commission sees fit for the use. So substantial evidence must be provided versus personal preference or speculation that would directly pertain to the requirements and conditions an applicant must meet to obtain the conditional use permit. And if they do meet all the requirements, then the local government has the ability to approve the conditional use permit or add additional conditions that would be supported by substantial evidence. So we are suggesting approval with conditions. So we are asking that lighting plan be submitted, especially with the relocation of the light pole, just to remind the applicant about the lighting requirements. Condition 2, engineering has had a chance to look at the permit, as did Waterworks and Lighting. There is some private water main relocation as a part of this project, so they did ask that a gate valve be placed on the west end of the proposed water main, and Walmart has already agreed to comply with that and shown us where they will be locating that. And then condition 5 is that minor modifications to the plan shall be permitted by the Community Development Department. And I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Carrie. So as with all public hearings, I'll call 3 times. So let's open the public hearing at 4:15. Is there anybody that wishes to speak against this project? Yeah, come on up to the podium here. State your name and your address, please.
Four six 4611 10th Street South. You know, I don't mind them adding on, but I live to the south of Walmart, and the noise that I endure is too much. They got street sweepers that come in at 12:30 at night, and they use gas leaf blowers, making huge noises at 12:30 at night, right 100 feet from my house. They got semis that park along there with refrigerator trucks running all night long. I don't think they should have that allowed, you know, over in that area. The street sweepers, about 8 years ago, they said they were going to come in at a different time of the day. And somebody said, okay. But then after 8 years, they start coming in at 12 at night again. And it's 3 or 4 times a week that they run around, and gas leaf blowers going off to blow out the rock islands. I don't mind them adding on, but they got to quiet down. You know, semis shouldn't park there. My other neighbors hear the noise all the time too. My window's 100 feet from there. That's about all I got to say.
Thank you. Kyle, if you can kind of note some of those things that we can follow up later on. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak against the request? And for a third and final time, does anybody wish to speak against? We can open it up. Does anybody wish to speak in favor of the request? And for a second time, does anybody wish to speak? And a third and final time. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
This is Amy Miles. I'm with PB2 Architecture and Engineering. We are the architect of record for this project. I'm really just making sure everyone's aware that I'm here to answer any questions, and I wanted to point out a couple of things that weren't necessarily mentioned in the description. Thank you for that description, by the way. The expansion will serve as a staging area for online orders, just like she said, but there will be no customer access to that area. So the online order pickup service is already operating out of that store. The expansion will just serve as a more dedicated staging area for associates to store orders that have been picked from the floor while they wait for customers to come pick those groceries up. We don't expect there to be any additional traffic due to this expansion. The traffic is already coming through because the online grocery pickup service is already being provided at the store. So there should be no new trips or anything like that due to the expansion itself.
Thank you.
And if anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Well, I think for a third time, does anyone wish to speak in favor? We can close the public hearing at 4:18. Commissioners, or does anybody have any questions? Or what are your wishes? Go ahead, Susan. Oh, Susan makes a motion for approval.
I'll second.
Thank you, Eric. So we have a motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries. Just want to make sure you have a mic. All right, we can move on to item number 7, which is Altman Construction Company, Inc., representing Mary's Place, 22-000931. A public hearing and action on a request for a conditional use permit to renovate a building for a multifamily housing in the operation of a temporary residential shelter at 520 8th Avenue South, parcel ID 3402962. We'll follow a similar procedure. Kyle? Or Carrie?
Go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, so yes, as you said, this is a public hearing and action on a conditional use permit to renovate a building for multifamily housing and the operation of a temporary residential shelter at 528th Avenue South. So just for some background, so the applicant is proposing an interior remodel to create multifamily housing and a temporary residential shelter. The existing building is located within the R3 multifamily medium-density residential district, and both multifamily housing of 9 to 15 units and temporary residential shelter are conditional uses within the R3 district. And the site plan to the left, the footprint is going unchanged. The improvements are interior. So reviewing the proposal, the size of the parcel is adequate, the property is suitable, and the use is consistent with the surrounding land uses. So the land uses are, it's kind of a gradient change from the downtown uses to the northeast, gradually going to less density and intensity to the southwest of residential. So we feel like this is an adequate buffer between the surrounding uses. Ingress and egress and parking are satisfactory. The approval would be contingent upon the 12 parking spaces either being retained as is or being, if that parking were changed, to be retained in some way. This project activates vacant space and provides a suitable transition within this multifamily district, as I said, between the downtown located northeast and the residences of increasingly lower density intensity to the southwest. So we are recommending approval with conditions. So the 12 on-site parking spaces would be a part of the proposal. Any proposed parking lot reconstruction shall include one ADA-approved parking space and landscape requirements to be reviewed and approved by the Community Development Department. Any trash containers located outside shall be concealed or suitably screened from public view to be reviewed and approved by the Community Development Department. Applicable building permits through the city shall be obtained, and community development staff shall have the authority to approve minor modifications to the plans. And I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. It's 4:22. Let's open a public hearing. I'm going to make some assumptions that there's going to be questions from the audience, so I think we'll save those questions for the end, but if you want to speak for or against the project, state what you want to state, but if you ask any questions, they probably won't be answered at this point, but we'll make sure they get answered once the public hearing's closed. So let's start with people that wish to speak against the request. So is there anybody that wishes to speak against the request? So if you'd state your name and address, please. We're asking that you kind of hold your comments to a few minutes. And that probably some of the comments, whether for or against, probably might be redundant, or not, I'd say redundant, but they're going to be the same. And so just so you know that.
I timed it. It's 2 minutes and 12 seconds.
Nice.
It's not too bad.
Perfect.
My name is Tori Peterson. I live at 550 8th Avenue South in Wisconsin Rapids. When I sat down this afternoon to write out what I wanted to say to you, I had the worst time getting my thoughts together because this issue is so important not only to my family, but to our entire neighborhood. I really need to get my point across here. We share a property line with the proposed shelter. I'm not only speaking for my husband and I, but for our neighbors as well. We do not want the shelter to move in. In the strongest possible terms, we do not want it. The neighborhood around 528th Avenue South has suffered enough. The owner before Josh Ramsden ran our area into the ground because of how he ran that building. He rented to anyone with a pulse. Didn't care about what went on in his building because he didn't live anywhere near it. Major drug dealing, gangs, gunfire, partying out front, relieving themselves out there as well, a daily police presence, arrests, overdoses, pedophiles, theft, vandalism. I could go on. This went on for decades. Our neighborhood has paid its dues regarding this building. It has taken our neighborhood nearly 10 years to recover from those awful days. So it just boggles my mind why in the world our city would want to place a shelter in that building, right in a residential neighborhood. How in good conscience could anyone approve this? Most of you don't live anywhere near 528th Avenue South, so you are not going to have to deal with the day-to-day of this place. I'm sure that some of the residents in this shelter will do well. They'll thrive and turn their lives around. I'm also sure that at least 50% are going to fail. They'll reoffend or relapse, and we'll all have ringside seats for it. My grandchildren do not need to witness law enforcement tackling some guy out in front of the shelter and haul him away. No one does. Please do not allow this project to go forward. Just close your eyes for a moment and picture the shelter moving in next door to your home before you vote. Thank you for allowing me to speak my mind.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak against this project? Dennis? Dennis, if you could state your name and address, please.
My name's Dennis Gaskill. I live at 511 8th Avenue South, which is right across the road from this building. And first, I'd like to say the wording is that it's transitional and not a homeless shelter, but the words from their website say something else. Their mission statement reads, and I quote, "Mary's Place is a nonprofit housing facility focused on helping the homeless." That's the beginning of it. So there's no doubt we'll have to deal with homeless people. Now, I'm not against the mission itself. In fact, I'm a board member of the board of directors member for the Wisconsin Rapids Habitat for Humanity, so I donate my time and energy to helping provide adequate shelter to those in need. But I am against this location for 3 reasons. First, it's a residential neighborhood. Children live immediately to the north, south, east, and west. It's a neighborhood full of families, and just a couple of blocks away, there's an elementary school. According to government data from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 38% of homeless people abuse alcohol, 26% abuse other drugs, and 20 to 25% suffer from some form of severe mental illness. From another government source, the Education Resources Information Center, 62.4% of the subjects in the study they conducted had been arrested for illegal behavior, and 44.3% of the males had a history of incarceration. This isn't the kind of behavior that should be imported into a residential family neighborhood. The second reason is that property values will plummet. A homeless shelter in a residential neighborhood can lower property values by 12%, according to a study conducted by the National Association of Realtors. Realtor.com lists the devaluation at 12.7%. New York Times cites a loss at 24 to 25%. The New York Post cites a loss at 17%. The range obviously varies depending on the situation, but the loss of value is undeniable. Why should those of us who own homes and worked our lives for them have our property devalued that drastically? What if we want to sell? Who would want to buy a home across the street from a homeless shelter? We'd be stuck and either have to take a big loss or the city, if the city didn't buy us out. There are empty buildings downtown, and that would be a more logical location, in my opinion. It's easy to get behind helping the homeless when it doesn't affect you personally. It's another story when it does. Third reason is the University of Pennsylvania study shows property crimes increased by 56% within 100 meters of a winter homeless shelter, with increased security needs for 400 meters. For those that don't know, 100 meters is a little over a length of a football field. So, my wife and I oppose this location, but I'd be willing to help with a search for a more appropriate location if anybody would be interested. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Anybody else wish to speak against? I want to make sure everybody wants to speak gets an opportunity to speak, so. State your name and address, please.
My name's Amy Hopkins. I live at 541 8th Avenue South, catty-corner to the building in question. I'm new to town. I've lived here almost 4 years. I came from a major metropolitan area, and I've seen what shelters do to neighborhoods. There's enough issues in this neighborhood as it is that are slowly being cleaned up. This is asking for trouble. I'm all for helping. Sure. Move them where they're going to get the most help. Put them on 8th Street, where there's businesses that are hiring daily. There are no businesses hiring in that area. There's bars where more trouble's going to come. It's a bad idea from start to finish.
Anybody else wish to speak? So I guess officially I'll call for a second time. Does anyone wish to speak against this request? And for a third and final time, does anybody wish to speak against the request? Oh, go ahead. State your name and address, please.
I'm Allison Gaskill. I live at 511 8th Avenue South, right across the street from this apartment building. I'm going to speak about the feel-good here. That building is a mess. As I understand, it's been a problem for many, 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 many years. I haven't lived there all that long, 14 years, and it's been the best it's been, and we do have a lot of strange things around the neighborhood. Let's make it worse. I would like you to put a wrecking ball on it. I'd like that thing knocked to the ground and flatten it out, put the grass out, and the kids that ride their bikes around town and almost get hit, that maybe can't afford the Boys and Girls Club, has a park to go to and to play, or a tennis court, or volleyball, or basketball. Something like that. Just get rid of it. What's the big deal with this place anyway? I don't even understand. It's terrible. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. So I'll call for anybody that wishes to speak in favor of this request. Go ahead. You'll all get a turn.
I'll try.
If you can state your name and address, please.
Jim Joyce. I live at 125144 County Road P. Edgar, Marathon County. I'm the president of the board of directors of Mary's Place. And I fully understand where this fear is coming from. Just so we can set some ground foundation here, we're a 501c3 organization. We are not a shopping cart parking lot, excuse me. We are not a hand up or a handout organization. We're a nudge forward organization. We have helped thousands of people in the Marshfield area. Most people don't even know where we're at, and we're right on Central Avenue. We do have a program-based lifestyle at Mary's Place. That means you have to go through an interview process. You have to have no outstanding warrants. You have to submit to a drug screen analysis at any given time. We help our residents, or excuse me, our program participants with basic needs. Make sure they got their healthcare needs met. Make sure they're going to their counseling if they have it. If they're supposed to be in some sort of group, they have to do that. If they're not willing to follow those basic rules, they're not allowed to be at Mary's Place. This is not a flop house at 2 in the morning where people can just come and lay down and sleep and stay warm overnight and go out today. We do require our participants to be out of the building between 10 and 2, looking for work if they don't have a job. On average, our participants have a job within 3 weeks. And at the end of the 6 weeks, they're paying for the room they're staying in. This isn't free. We have a lot of people that donate a lot of time and money and energy to make sure this works, not just so we feel good and can wear a vest and say, look at us, look what we did, so that our community can be stronger, safer, so that employers can have people that will come to work every day, knowing that somebody will be accountable for the 6-month program they got, is, hey, get your butt out of bed and go to work. There's nothing fluffy about Mary's Place. There's nothing free about Mary's Place. If you're there for the first 6 weeks, you don't have a job, you're cleaning the place. And if anything looks out of place, you're submitting a urinalysis so we can make sure you're safe. There's a lot of fear, and I get it. You drive through Wausau, you look at Salvation Army. You got people sleeping in front of Salvation Army because there's not enough room inside of it. And when the winter comes, they open up a warming shelter for those extra people to go sleep. That's not Mary's Place. That's not what we do. We help people get from a very low part of their life back to society in a very relatively quick way. And like I said, we've helped thousands of people. Therefore, we have thousands of success stories. And I'm willing to stick around afterwards and answer any questions. I understand the fear, but we're not putting together some double-wide trailer in a lot in the center of Wisconsin Rapids. We're talking a multi-million-dollar project, long-term, short-term, however you want to look at it. A lot of money is being invested, a lot of heart, a lot of sweat, a lot of planning is going into this so that everybody's safe, and not just the people inside that building, but that neighborhood and the city of Wisconsin Rapids as a whole. This is a step forward and a step up from what we have now in the city. I'm not from here. I'm not going to pretend to understand here, but I've been asked to come here by a lot of people in the city of Wisconsin Rapids to try to set this up, to try to move forward, to try to help people who don't have any help right now, and to do it in a way that we know works, that's a proven program, and we can set wheels in motion where people couldn't move their feet before for whatever reason. And that's what I got.
Thank you. Yeah, Mike.
Mayor Blazer, members of the Planning Commission, city staff, and residents, concerned and interested residents. My name's Mike Hittner. I'm at 980 First Avenue South, 3 blocks south of there. I own property a half a block away from it, so I've got an interest in this, certainly. We were the family that sold the property so a family center could be there, because we believed in helping those ladies to get help when they were having problems with marital problems or some of those issues, and thank goodness to the Mead Witter Foundation for supporting and helping to build a building and everything like that. I got interested in this because there's been quite a bit of concern about it. I called Mary's place in Marshfield, talked to Pete, he's the live-in resident manager there, and I asked him some of the questions, because you hear rumors about everybody's wearing ankle bracelets and that. And I asked him, of your 13 residents, is there anybody wearing that? No. He said they have a great relationship, and I also called the Marshfield Police Department. They have a great relationship with the Marshfield Police Department. They don't see any problems. He also said that Sheriff Becker and the Wood County Sheriff's Department are very much behind and know what's going on there, and so they're very supportive of that. So I'm lending my support to it just because I think it's going to help the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Go ahead, sir. Come up to the microphone, state your name and address, please.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Rock Larson. I live at 524 Old Wausau Road in Stevens Point. I am not a resident, but I have been for the last 19 years the Wood County Veteran Service Officer. I work in the courthouse every day. I have been a member for most of those years of, used to be the Southern Wood County Homeless Coalition, and now it's Continuum of Care. I'm very familiar with CAP services and many of the Family Center, many of the other places, and Mary's Place. We've placed veterans there. They are not, this is transitional housing. This isn't a homeless shelter. Transitional means they're working towards a goal, and they don't put up with any behavior that you're not going towards that goal. I've worked with the principals. I'm working right now with them to set up, maybe bringing some VA resources in. We've got HUD-VASH vouchers, which are HUD, VA, healthcare, housing, special vouchers that don't count against our HUD vouchers that are here in the county or in the city. There's supportive services for veterans and families, which is a federal program. There's the Veterans Outreach and Recovery Program. All these programs have caseworkers that work with these people. So we're not just, they don't want to just dump people there as a place to get them out from, say, people familiar with Stevens Point and the library. The library has a covered walkway from one parking lot to Main Street. If you're there at 9 o'clock, there'll be about 20 homeless people living under there. So these people are out there. They need our help. We have programs. We just don't have a place to start them in that program. So I'm in favor of this and the resources that we can bring, not just to the veterans in our community, but to our community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dean. Dean, if you could state your name and address, please.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Dean Ramsden. I actually owned the duplex on Gardner that burned down a couple years ago. So I'm very familiar with this unit, part of the apartment association. My nephew actually bought the property and owns the property, Josh. A man died in that property. That property was a crap hole, drugs infested place. I wish he would have never bought it, to be honest with you. All the neighbors know what that place used to be. And he took it on, and a man died in there on a fire. Wasn't his fault. And I've seen Josh emotionally to the point of probably taking his life of all the emotional stress he's had with that property. And I'm being super honest with you. My brother stepped in to help him. Been some issues with the city and getting things done. That's a whole nother discussion. And I'm very thankful to see these folks stand up and the foundation to put $2 million into this project. I think it's going to be a nice project. They're monitored. I'm a landlord. I'm accepting a gentleman that's in drug court with 2 children. If it wasn't for CAP Services helping him out, I probably wouldn't have helped him out. You never know if we're going to get rent or, get behind on their rent, so on and so forth. And we got bills to pay. We got taxes to pay, insurance, maintenance, mortgages, water bills, tax bills, electric bills. And so it's not an easy task taking this on and trying to help the community and help these people. They need a place to stay. They're staying at motels, very expensive, especially when you have, you're trying to fight through drug court, you're trying to have a job, you're trying to raise kids, and it's a lot. It's a heavy burden. So I really appreciate the folks that are willing to stand up and do this, and I just hope you guys approve it. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Anybody else wish to speak in favor? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Danielle Potts. I live at 240 13th Street South in Wisconsin Rapids. Originally, I came tonight to ask for a yield sign and decided to look into the community's response about Mary's Place. I am familiar with the Marshfield location. I wanted to be a positive voice for them. Our community desperately needs this. Today, I did some demographics in just our area, and we have over 70 homeless families in Wisconsin Rapids. That means 70 plus children that are affected by homelessness. And I understand that this is not a homeless shelter, but I can't imagine that it would be a good place to start. We hear everyone saying all the time, we should be helping our people, our vets, our country. But then when given an opportunity to, I hear, not in my neighborhood. What about drugs, pedophiles? So I did some digging on that too. Within a 2-city block of this address, there are already 11 registered sex offenders. As to drugs, well, I won't say exactly where, but I'm sure the people that live nearby know that there have been raids on more than 3 homes just this year. We have drugs in our city. That's just the nature of the beast, and it's a sad one. So I ask you, why not your neighborhood? Why not be a positive change? Mary's Place in Marshfield has been very successful. I hope we can give our community something to be proud of as well. Thank you for your time, and I hope you listen with your hearts, not just your ears. Thank you.
Thank you. And Danielle, just to let you know, if we go along, Public Works is going to be held in the room right behind you.
Okay, I'll be there. Sorry.
No problem. Does anybody else wish to speak in favor of this request? Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name's Tom Altman. I'm with Altman Construction. I want to speak in favor of the project. My grandparents lived in that neighborhood for over 30 years. I went to school, grade school in the neighborhood there. I fully support this project, and I believe it's a good fit. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else like to speak? Go ahead, Helen. If you could state your name and address, please.
Helen Streekstra, 531 Hill Street. Being a landlord since 1975, we've seen a lot of changes, and Dean addressed many of them. I've also been looking at this property, and unfortunately, the money that has been put into it by the Ramsden family is over the top crazy already. It's a hulk. It is, the demolition has happened. So now I'm very encouraged to see somebody local as a good partnership with the Altman Company. Hopefully this will go forward. We desperately need it. How it's managed, let's not reinvent the wheel. It's working in Marshfield. Let's just look at what they're doing and what they're doing well and improve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Anyone else wish to speak in favor of this project? Okay, first, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Lucas. I'm at 1930 First Street North. I'm the architect for this project. The state of Wisconsin approved the drawings for this project. They've been in the community development project or community development department. It's approved as an R2 occupancy. There are 4 residential occupancies in the state code. This cannot be transient in nature. It has to be an apartment or long-term rental. So I don't know whether or not that fits the description of a homeless shelter, but the tenants need to be long-term. On top of that, I live across the street from a Cubs house. I understand the baggage that comes with that in my neighborhood and what it does to my property value. I would be thrilled if somebody was going to spend $2 million across the street from me to take a building that's built from probably 40s, that beautiful brick building, turn that into what really will be a gem, I think, in that neighborhood. I would love to live across the street from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else wish to speak in favor? I guess so officially I'll ask for a second time, does anybody wish to speak in favor of this request? And a third and final time.
Hi, I'm joining via Zoom. I'm wondering, am I able to speak in favor?
Yes, please. State your name and your address.
Thank you. Sarah Holt, 521 Bruce Lane, Wisconsin Rapids. I've been a project lead for this project that we've been working on for our transitional housing, and I just wanted to share something that I'm really glad that folks are coming and speaking in favor. Again, it's over a $2.1 million investment that we take a lot of pride in and want to make this building beautiful and functional and make it more of a pride point in the community. I drive past it frequently. I go to church in that area, and I can see how blighted that building has been. And Altman has been wonderful in helping us draw up plans. I know I've heard a lot of safety concerns, and Jim has done a wonderful job addressing how folks for this program apply. They go through extensive background checks. They work with the case manager. There are rules in place. If people don't follow the rules, they are asked to leave. We have strong partnerships with Wood County Sheriff's Department, who has been a part of this planning team since the beginning of this project. We are also able to drug test. The house is also going to have key fob access, so only those who are staying there through the program will have access to the building. It's not able to just come and go. We don't encourage visitors in rooms. There are security cameras in the building as well as outside the building as well. And then I think it's just really important, again, to talk about homeless shelter versus transitional housing. So I used to work with Wood County Health Department and Human Services, and I worked with individuals who were just really down on their luck for various reasons. And it was very difficult for me to meet with folks who I knew weren't going home that night. They were staying in vehicles or staying with friends. I actually had an individual who had a drug addiction and was participating in drug court. And because there was no transitional housing or affordable housing in place, he kept staying in his vehicle for 3 months until he could save enough to rent an apartment, instead of staying with friends who he knew were using drugs, and because he wanted to stay away. So transitional housing is meant to be 6 months to a year. It's not meant to be short-term, coming and going out through our doors. The program is really meant to help people get on their feet so then they can transition into that long-term housing, which is an apartment building or a complex or maybe even a home. When we were putting together our grant, we were talking to a lot of community projects and organizations, and all of them were saying the same thing. We are struggling with housing issues. We don't have places for people to go. We're sending them to the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army is in Stevens Point. It's a 30-minute drive. It's hard to get people there in the first place. And then we're not even sure if they have availability. You can enter the doors at 9 p.m. at night, and then you have to leave at 7 in the morning, and it's a good luck. There's no support. It's just a place to stay. Mary's Place is so much more than that. People participate, have case management. They pay $80 a week if they want to pay weekly, or rent is $320 a month. And our program participants, the general length of stay is 6 months up to a year. And so this is not a homeless shelter. That is not our intent. We are here to help people move into long-term housing and be that bridge between where they might be now and helping them find some security moving forward. We also have on-site management. I think somebody alluded to, they talked to Pete up in Marshfield. So there is somebody who actually lives on premises and is always keeping an eye on the building and interacting with the program participants so that we know what's going on. We have a strong oversight committee that will be overseeing this project and meeting, which is in multiple community partners. And so we're not just putting folks in this house and then saying good luck. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of organizations, human services, health services that are going to be working to make sure that people are successful. And I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who spoke in favor of this project, as well as folks who came out to speak against. I think it's important that everyone's voice is heard, and I hope that we can continue our discussion and hopefully address some of the concerns that people might have. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to speak, sir?
Good afternoon. I'm Doug Christensen. I'm the mental health officer with the Wood County Sheriff's Department. We're located just across the river at 400 Market Street. So part of my job is I interact with people that are in crisis situations, people that are maybe battling addiction issues, people that are contemplating suicide, people that are just down and out on their luck and they have nowhere else to turn. Now, through the year and a half that I've been in this position, I've come across some amazing resources that we have available to us right here. Things that may not be available in other parts of the state. But one of the areas that we are lacking in a big way in Southwood County is housing. I was asked early on, after I took this position, by one of our outreach programs, what is our greatest need? And without hesitation, I was able to say housing. You see, when somebody's down and out and they're trying to participate or interact with one of these programs, the outreaches, the tools that are available to them so that they can begin to move forward in their life, that they don't have to stay in the hole where they're at, they need to be able to take care of basic human needs first. If you can't take care of food, shelter, and clothing, you're not going to be thinking about, well, my therapist told me this, or this program that I'm a part of told me to go and attend these classes. They're worried about where they're going to lay their head at night. Am I going to be safe? Am I going to freeze? Am I going to get wet? This is an opportunity for us in Southwood County to be able to begin to assist those people that are in need, the people that I work with. And I work with these people both on and off duty. So it's not just that I'm being paid to do what I do. This is where my heart is at. So I would like to put it out there, and this is with Sheriff Becker's backing. I support Mary's Place and the transitional housing here in Southwood County. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. does anybody else wish to speak in favor of the request? So I guess that's official the third time. Does anybody wish to speak in favor? All right, we will close the public hearing at 4:55. And Plan Commissioners, any questions? I can move that closer for you.
That's as far as it'll go, I think. Oh, well, okay, there we go. Mr. Chair. Thank you. I guess I have a question with regard to the commitment that Mary's Place would have to placing someone in residence on site. Is that a commitment for this new facility?
Explain that a little better. We're not an emergency shelter, so someone comes knocking on the door, says, "Wait, I need a place to sleep." We're going to have to kindly tell them, "Here's an application." We need to make sure that everybody else in the building is safe, so we do run background checks on everybody. We do. We don't ask for references. We don't ask for past landlords, that kind of thing, because obviously, if they had a decent rental history, they wouldn't be coming to Mary's Place. But as far as an immediate need, that's not us. It really isn't. We have in the past in Marshfield, because we are more set up for single-person rooms in Marshfield. We have taken calls from, like, say, the sheriff or the police department. "Hey, look, you know, this guy's car broke down. He's got no money. Can you help him out?" And caps are like on a Saturday or whatever. Sure, bring him in. And then we go in there and we start making phone calls and trying to see if this person's good or not, a good fit. Odds are they're not, and they're going to leave the next day or two. But for the most part, no. We don't just open the door and let somebody in, if that was the question. And as far as commitment from us long-term, maybe, was that the question?
No, the question I have is, you referenced that there was an on-site agent or manager or
Yes.
representative, and sort of, it seemed to me that you were saying that that would be the case in this new place here in Wisconsin Rapids. I did look at the plans that were submitted, and I don't see in those plans an office space or anything that would indicate that you have on-site programming where there is a staff person available. Is that true or not?
There is. On the lower level, if that was corrected, it said 2 first floors, but the lower level, the first one, there's actual meeting area, and there's an office next to the laundry, and then the small apartment in the corner, not the ADA one, but the smaller one, that's going to be the live-in quarters for the permanent site manager. And they will be there 24/7 unless they need to take some time off, which we do, as a board, we do make sure that their mental health is secure as well.
Thank you, Susan. Why don't you stay there for a second? Does anybody else have any questions for him?
And I might have, and I know Sarah brought it up, but security is first. The cameras, the key fobs that get in and out. If somebody is bad and we tell them they have to leave, it's a click of the mouse and they can no longer come in the building. If somebody lets them in the building, we'll have it on camera. And having an on-site manager as well, they'll be able to react, pretty quickly to something like that. Have we had people like that in the past? Yes. What do? We call Marshville PD. They pick them up. No lights, no sirens. You just come get them. They take them away. Has that happened a lot? I can count on one hand, and I've been there about 12 years, that's had to happen. Giving multifamily dwellings in any part of the state of Wisconsin, I'm sure that's happened in each and every one of those over the past 10 years as well. So I think we're pretty much on par with anything else in those regards.
Does anybody else have any questions for him?
I just had a question. How long has it been in place in Marshfield, and kind of maybe the backstory of how this started?
Okay, Mary's Place was started by Kevin and Nancy Bornbach. Nancy's sister Mary had some severe mental illness and some drug addiction issues because of it. And there's no place for her to go. So they saw this place on Central Avenue, North Central Avenue, that was just like what this place on 8th Street used to be. Neighbors hated it. Front, back, side smelled of urine. It was a horrible place. Cockroaches, bed bugs, you name it. It was horrible. They bought it at a very reduced price, put a ton of money into it, ended up killing their marriage. But that's where I got suckered in on the board, and then got pushed to president. I'm with Mary's Place because I love it. Since then, we've learned and had to adjust policies and procedures in Mary's Place so that we don't keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Believe it or not, when we first opened up, we'd have people calling and say, is there room for me? And we'd say, sure, come on up. Where are you from? He said, I'm on my way. Okay. They give us their ID, and it's a Chicago driver's license. Lo and behold, it's June. They're coming up to go fishing and live cheaply at Mary's Place. So we've learned these rules, these lessons over the time, women, domestic violence. We get people that don't fit domestic violence programs come to us for assistance and help. We help them too. But we don't help them like, say, Shirley's House of Hope or the other people do. We get them so their head is a little more straight, and then they can maybe go back to something a little more intense than what we have for any type of abuse type situation. We don't really cover that. So, like I said, over the last 10 years or so, we've been not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but just making it rounder, truing it up so that we can do what we need to do to help people get on the right path. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's that cut and dry. If you want to be in the program, you got to follow the rules. You don't follow the rules, you're not in the program. In the summertime, our population goes down. In the wintertime, believe it or not, people follow every single rule of Mary's Place. Makes sense, doesn't it? But the people that go through the summertime, that really want to be a part of it, become successful. And the businesses around us like it too. If there's a program called the Joseph Project, Wausau has one. I got to talk to Scott Ballstead, who's the local representative for Senator Ron Johnson. He came to us, and what he wanted to do is take our people and bus them to Wausau for the Joseph Project and keep them. Because he saw what we were doing with our people would fit their program better than the people coming out of jail. And then the employers would love them more. That's what we do. That's how we help people. I'm going to throw Pete, our Marshfield manager, under the bus. He is a success story at Mary's Place, and he will tell you that right now. He came with a problem. He came knowing he needed to do something different in his life. He followed the rules, and now he's our living manager. Smart guy, bachelor's degree in business from the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, and this is what he wants to do. It's really easy to get caught up in it because you see so many people getting helped over the years that it just becomes a part of you, part of your family. And it's hard for people who don't know it and don't understand it. And in their heads, it's just another crack house that's going to open up. But we're not. It took over a decade to get Jerry the barber across the street from Mary's Place on Central Avenue to understand that we weren't a flop house anymore. It took a decade. But we did it. We proved it to him. And that's what we're going to do here too. If we have to prove it, we'll prove it.
Just one follow-up. You had a mention of between 10 and 2 residents are out, but is there a curfew for at night?
Yes, there is. It has to be quiet after, it depends. We like no movement. Let's see, Mary's Place in Marshfield's different. We have a communal kitchen, so after 9 o'clock, we don't want anybody in there because people got to get up in the morning to go to work. If they're clanging pots and pans around and being dumb and watching TV or whatever, no, we can't have that, so they got to be done. But absolute curfew, if you're not working third shift, it's 10 o'clock. You need to be in. If you come in intoxicated, inebriated, come in late. Even if you come in late on a regular basis, we'll give you a strike. And we're not 3 strikes, we're 2. You don't get that third one. And people know that. It usually takes 1 or 2 program participants to make the rest of the building understand it, but we do it right away. We don't play around. We can't. Other people's futures are at stake, excuse me. So we can't risk messing up somebody else's future based on one person's inability to act properly. I know that sounds tough, but that's what we've learned over the last decade, that this is how we have to do it.
I have a question. So with migratory transitional housing, do you see that, or my concern was we would
the people coming up
attract
fishing?
transitional housing people from other areas and then we kind of cycle through and they'll go somewhere else after they leave you?
Right. So that's where our application process comes in. What was your last known address? We'll look it up. If it's another transitional living center, that you're probably, you didn't work in their program, well, how are you going to work in ours? If they're a right fit, they're right. They're the good fit for Mary's Place. If they're not, they're not. Our focus is Marshfield. We serve Wood County. We've had Clark County, Neillsville, their healthcare center. That's another problem, because they considered us a flop house, and they'd send the people who ran out of insurance money or whatever in their mental health boards, and they just drop them off at their front door as well. It took some real letters and phone calls from people to get them to stop that. But now everybody knows that's not what we do. But migratory, we try to put a stop to that right away. Wisconsin Rapids is a beautiful city, and it's only getting prettier. I've been coming to the Wisconsin Rapids area since I was 4 years old. My grandparents had a place down in Rome, and the only place to get a hamburger was Wisconsin Rapids. So that's where we would come up. And from little on, I've been here. It just so happened our jobs were in Wausau, so we lived up there. Moved up there from southeastern Wisconsin.
Do you have a geographical area? So if I lived in Madison and I wanted to apply for Mary's Place here in Wisconsin Rapids because I heard about it down there, is that something that I could do, or do you have a restricted area like we're serving Wisconsin Rapids area and that's it?
Our main focus would be Wisconsin Rapids, Wood County. The counties surrounding us, Adams and Juneau, they don't have much. Portage, they have services. Marathon, they have services. But our main focus would be right here. There's enough need in Wisconsin Rapids to keep us going forever. And that sounds kind of starry-eyed, but it's the truth. You guys probably read these statistics. You get people calling you looking for help. It's the truth. I mean, I don't ever foresee us needing to go somewhere else to get people in the program. And we would, again, probably most immediately turn them down.
I was going to say, because not maybe seeking it, but people from outside the area seeking the opportunity to maybe stay there. And is that really what we want to do?
No. What we've learned is people burn bridges in the cities where they're at, and they try to cross these bridges here too before they burn them down. And we don't entertain that very well. When I first started at Mary's Place, we had a young man come in from California, L.A. He talked with a inner city hood type accent until we asked him, "Do you have any pending charges?" And he immediately broke into proper English and said, "Yes, but nothing extraditable." So he left. We said, "We'll call you later." We called local Marshfield PD, and they picked him up and they sent him right back to California because he was definitely wanted for something that was really extraditable. A lot of it is feeling. It's just like when you interview somebody for a job. You say, "Hey, you're going to do this job." He's 20 years old. I got 10 years experience. Well, no, you don't. People who make up a story in their head tend to say it over and over and over again. And we try to find people who don't want that story anymore. And it's been working out.
And then, so you don't provide any counseling connection. Your, I guess, mission is the housing end of it, or do you take an active role in helping them find a job, seek treatment, seek counseling?
What we do is, in Marshfield, is we're in contact with North Central Community Action, United Way, not so much United Way anymore, Wood County. And if somebody needs those types of services, there's somebody who already does that and does it way better than we could do it. So we get them in touch with that organization, that group, that department, whatever it is, because they do it better than us. But then we hold their feet to that fire. You have to do this. This is what you're supposed to do. You have to do this. And that's been successful as well.
So I take it you probably have regular meetings with the residents there,
do.
what find the status?
We do weekly meetings, house meetings. It's mandatory. A lot of it's housekeeping, behavioral, just stuff we got to throw out there to make people be people. We do sit one-on-one with the tenants, just to try to feel where they're at. Any good job leads this week or today or whatever. And the good thing is right now you can walk out and get a job. That's pretty easy. So if you're not getting one in a week, either your sights are set way too high or you're not doing it. So what we learned is, here's a piece of paper, have them sign it. So when you go in and get an application and fill it out, whoever's on duty has to sign it. And they bring it back. We say, okay, you did these job searches today. Thank you. We used to hand out little burner phones. We had money for that at one time. But now it seems like everybody has one anyway. It's kind of weird. So we don't do that anymore. But we make sure that, they're in contact with whoever they need to be in contact for treatment or service. If there is a better program for them, now we'll learn sometimes 2-3 months into their stay at Mary's Place that, whoa, you really can't keep a job because you have a real disability. You've never realized this before. Nobody's ever told you have a real disability. We'll put you in touch with somebody who can actually help you with that disability. And lo and behold, yes, they qualify for all kinds of stuff. And then we get them in Marshfield at Cedar Rail, and there's other places throughout Wood County where we can get them into, where they can live and have normal lives, and then get treatment necessary that to help them through their disabilities. But yeah, no, that's a good time.
Thank you. I grilled you enough. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, what's the typical length of stay at Mary's Place currently?
Currently, right now, I believe it's 5 to 6 months, and that's over the last 6 months, because of summer. People tend to get more ambition and go to work and make money. Now you can make money, and tend to move on quicker. Winter months, we could go from November to May. Have to extend that 6 months out, another month or two for them so they can get their feet on the ground better. It's more stable. But on average, it's 5 to 6 months.
Is there a limit to how long they can?
Yeah.
Yes. We really don't want more than 6 months if we can help it. But again, if there's a problem, we will go up to a year, if there's a problem. We've had very few. We had a gentleman living at Mary's Place when I started that had been living there for 20 years. Before Mary's Place was an entity, he was living in that house. So we said, hey, you want to stay? This was his home. So we let him stay until he decided he didn't want to be a part of the rules anymore. So then that's when he decided to move out. He was there 27 years total in that house. But again, that was something not typical. But for the most part, you should be out of there in 6 months. That's the goal. You should be on your feet. You should be solid in your treatment programs if you need one. You should be solid in your employment history. You should have enough money coming in and money saved, because our rent is relatively inexpensive, half or less than a third of what some places are going for right now. So they have some money, they can then go apply for an apartment somewhere with some real history.
And can a person come back?
We've had people come back. The biggest issue there is probably romantic in nature. They'll do good, get a place, or move in with somebody, and then that fails. And then they got no place to go. So they call us back, and if they're decent, we'll start them in a 6-week program again. And normally they leave. But that's probably maybe a dozen times in the last 10 years we've had people come back, to my knowledge anyway.
Go ahead, Susan.
I'm wondering, the program that you present here must have a staff.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how many employees you have at Mary's Place, and if you could give us some idea what the staffing situation would be in this facility.
Right now, we have our director, Adam Fisher, and Pete, the live-in manager. They handle day-to-day at Mary's Place. What we will be doing for Wisconsin Rapids, because it's going to be a bigger task, is a live-in manager and their own site director. And then open it up with the meeting area. I don't know if you guys saw that in the plans or not, for the programs to actually come in-house. So their day, if they're not working, is going to be full. They're going to be held accountable by the director that'll be there and the live-in manager. So we will have hopefully one live-in and one full-time director on site.
So would that include people who would manage the exterior of the building or any of the janitorial needs, or how do you accommodate that?
Well, the live-in manager handles a lot of that, but if you're in that 6-week portion of the beginning of the program and you don't have a job, you're not just going to go lay in a bed all day long. You actually have to do something to be at Mary's Place. So you'll be cleaning hallways, cleaning the communal toilets, laundry room, that kind of stuff, mowing the lawn, making the place look nice. Because that, everybody here has done a good job and said, wow, this looks nice, and you feel good about it. That feeling just doesn't materialize out of thin air. You have to do something to get that in your heart and your body and your mind. So we put them to work. But if everybody's working, that falls on the site manager, and that means his mental health will get stressed, and we'll have to come in as board members and pick up the slack, but give him a break. But yeah, so that's what we do historically. Board members come in and pick up the slack when they need vacations or time off or
That was going to be my question again, is what happens when that person does take time off? That somebody will replace that person and they'll be on.
Yeah, no. And I work for the state of Wisconsin. I work for the Department of Juvenile Corrections. You can Google me, my name's on there. I work up in Lincoln Hills. I got a very flexible schedule, believe it or not. I work half the year. We work 12-hour shifts, which turn into 16s, but that's another story. But we get to pick our vacation every year, just like most government agencies do, and I got 6 weeks. And so if I just tell them, if you want to take your vacation, let me know, and as soon as you can, and I'll take time off and I'll cover. I've been a hands-on president since I started. I don't take a nickel. I've never taken a nickel from Mary's Place, never will. This is my passion, and my family as well. So.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? And honestly, I guess anybody in the audience have a question? Might as well get all the questions out there.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I think maybe you should probably go to a microphone, because then anybody else out on TV land can't hear you either.
So I'm Allison Gaskill at 511 8th Avenue South. So with your heating, your cooling, your food, your sanitary items, who's paying for that? Taxpayers?
No.
Who? That
Actually,
you don't take a dime?
Well, I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't take it. I've never taken a nickel. That's the truth. You can go ahead and Google that. I don't care.
I don't either.
There's, the tenants actually.
Sir, could you speak in the microphone also?
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. The question was, who pays for the basic services in Mary's Place? The heat, the plumbing, or the sewer, the water, the trash, those sorts of things. It's not free. Mary's Place is not free. They pay rent. And our model is.
Their jobs that
yes.
they don't have?
Well, again, in the first 6 weeks, they should be able to get a job. And we counsel them, we help them with interview skills, and we help them get jobs, the best that we can. We can't just go give them a job.
And this $2 million grant,
Mhm.
do you think it couldn't be used for something else more substantial in this town?
The the $2 million grant, could that be used for something more substantial in the city of Wisconsin Rapids?
That's really up to the person that issues those grants.
It is.
It's a private foundation that issued the grant, and so it's really up to them.
Yeah, that's not, you know, I was asked to come here. Our organization was asked to come here.
Yeah, they applied for a grant, and the organization gave them that grant.
And then we did. We had people like kick it around like Sheriff Becker and other people in the community that said, hey, look, would you guys be willing to do this because we have a need? And they like the way we operate. If they didn't like the way we operate, we wouldn't have got a phone call.
So maybe there's another building around here.
So let's not have a big back and forth dialogue. If you have a question, let's ask questions and.
I'll be here. We can talk.
Yeah. It's really not meant to be back and forth. I just want to give anybody an opportunity with a question. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anybody else have a Susan?
I have a question for Kyle, and that has to do with the set of recommendations, the staff recommendations for this particular issue. And am I correct in seeing here that the only exception that might be made to the standards, the construction standards or other zoning standards that apply would be a modification of the parking stalls, but everything else would be to the code and construction standards for this type project?
Right, so the construction standards are handled separately under the building code. The zoning standards with regards to the use specifically and/or anything related to the site, the parking, ingress, egress, access, things of that nature. There are standards of review. Many of them have been outlined in the staff report. Specifically in regards to parking, there are really two uses that we've identified here and interpreted in the zoning code. One is the multifamily, 9 to 15 units. So previously there was 12 units, they're now reducing it to 11 units. So that's triggered the conditional use permit because it is a change of use, as well as what we've identified as temporary housing. So that also requires a conditional use permit. So because of those two different uses, there's somewhat two different parking requirements. And we've identified that the temporary housing is more so occurring in the first floor unit where they operate what's called the Genesis room. I believe that's also at the Marshfield location. That's where maybe more of the transients are staying prior to being transitioning into one of the more permanent rooms. And that has a different parking component. So when you add those all up, we've determined that 12 stalls are necessary on site for the use.
Also, Kyle, I guess so everybody knows, so if this conditional use is approved, it can also be revoked, correct?
Right. So if, for example, there were concerns about how the use would impact the neighborhood, as several of the standards of review specifically pertain to public health, safety, well-being, and that's more difficult to measure when the use isn't established, you could certainly add a condition that identifies, within a year's time, this item be brought back before Plan Commission and Common Council and reviewed, and we would, we'd probably work directly with Mary's Place staff. We'd work with the police department, the sheriff's department to see what kind of responses and incidents, if any, have occurred, and we'd bring that back before the board or before the Plan Commission and Council to review and determine if they feel as though the health and safety and welfare of the general public and neighborhood is being protected.
Well, also, it wouldn't need to be a condition either. Just because it's not a condition doesn't mean it can't be reviewed if there are a number of complaints or problems there or law enforcement calls.
Right.
Or neighborhood complaints, it still could be reviewed without even a condition.
We typically ask for some sort of substantial evidence. Now, we're going to interpret that if it's just one police call the day they open, that may not be substantial enough for us to place it on the next agenda item. Now, if it's something that's reoccurring, something that's frequent, that's warranting or substantial evidence, then yes, we can take it forward to Plan Commission without that condition placed upon it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
Is this, so Josh Ramsden owns the building now. Is he going to continue to own the building and rent it, or is Mary's Place buying the building?
It's my understanding that Mary's Place will be purchasing it, but I think the applicant can certainly answer that question.
Jim Joyce again. Yes, we will be purchasing the building. There is an offer to purchase already on the table. And it will be in our name.
Thank you. With that, just going back and all the issues that have been going on and trying to get it up and running in the last couple of years, my understanding is it had to go to state-approved plans, and those have been done. Are those plans, do they, what I kept hearing was they needed an elevator, they needed to have an entire sprinkling system put into the facility in order to bring it up to code. Was that just kind of hearsay, or was that part, like, are all these, everything that was expected of Josh Ramsden, are all those things covered in these plans in order to make this approved living?
Yeah, is that a question for me or the applicant?
I guess whoever has the answer to it.
Jim, I'll let you handle that one as the architectural
Jim
expert.
Lucas, I'm the architect. The elevator is not a requirement, and there is not an elevator. The building needs some accessibility, so there's a ramp being added to provide accessibility to the first floor. Fire separation is between units. It's a state requirement, and the 3 floors wood frame does require the sprinkler system.
So being that it was basically gutted, which was the problem that kind of happened in the first place, is it all got gutted. So now it's being done to the state standards that it needs to be done to in order for anybody to live in that building and for the city to approve it.
Yes, a renovation greater than 50% of a building gets treated as a new building.
Okay.
So that it is essentially a new building with the exception of the masonry that's there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Tom, look like you're getting ready. Nope. Okay. What are your wishes? Well, I guess to take this to vote, obviously a motion has to be made in the affirmative. So I will make the motion to approve the conditional use request with the conditions assigned by the planning department.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And oppose? So it looks like the motion carried. The next, it'll go to council for their final approval at the next council meeting. So we're on to item 8, which is City of Wisconsin Rapids 22-000929, public hearing and action on a request to amend Chapter 11 zoning ordinance, specifically Appendix A, land use matrix, and Appendix B, land use, to reclassify and define the tourist rooming house. Planning?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a result of 2 months' worth of discussion regarding our tourist rooming house standards, where they're permitted, and primarily as it relates to whether it's a conditional use or a permitted use in different zoning districts, as well as the supplemental standards that exist under the definition. So staff was requested to bring back a simplified definition and ordinance, so we've done just that. As a reminder, again, a tourist rooming house is a place where transients, individuals that stay for a period of less than 30 consecutive calendar days stay, and it can be an entire home or it can be a single room in a house. So in simplifying the ordinance, it's pretty simple for us to, again, just change the conditional status within the RR, R1, R2, and R3 districts to the permitted status, and then in terms of the definition, to remove all of the supplemental standards. I do want to note that, staff really isn't strongly supporting or strongly opposed to this change. But if the change does occur where it becomes permitted and there are no supplemental standards, recognize that, again, the state does have requirements. The state still will require a permit be obtained through the county. Room tax will still have to be paid under statute as well. And then I would also strongly suggest thinking about separately licensing them in our licensing chapter, very similar to the example I provided that Marshfield does, again, as a way to offer more protection to the residents that are staying within these facilities. And that's all I have.
I guess most of our audience is gone, but I guess at 5:30 we can open a public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak against this request? Does anybody, for a second time, wish to speak against this change to the zoning ordinance? And for a third time, does anybody wish to speak against? Okay, let's, does anybody wish to speak in favor? For a second time, does anybody wish to speak in favor? And for a third and final time. Let's close the public hearing at 5:31. Commission questions, comments? Patrick? Or I'm sorry, Susan? Okay.
Doesn't matter, but my question, I guess, has to do with the fact that we've wrestled with this now at a couple of planning commission meetings, and we've set a set of requirements that seem to accommodate all of the concerns that we had. And if we were to go with this new modification to the code, we would obliterate that. And we have no assurance that there would be a set of standards that would come in behind us and take care of our concerns. So I'm not exactly clear as to why you would be proposing this.
This is a result of discussion at the council level, instructing staff to bring back an ordinance amendment that simplified the process. Again, I'm not strongly recommending this. I think what we have works well. But again, as I was instructed to do so, you have an ordinance in front of you now that simplifies the process, should you choose to act on it and recommend it for council.
Patrick.
Okay, so just to bring everybody up to speed, this has been going on for a few months. And during the first meeting, it was narrowly passed, which I found surprising because the state has ruled that you cannot deny a tourist rooming house permit. Then during the Common Council meeting, we had discussed it at length. And then between, maybe it was before that, I'm sorry, I had looked into the regulations, like are these, you can't deny it, but what are is it already regulated? So I did a little bit of research, found out way more about the tourist rooming houses than I ever want to know. They are regulated through the Wood County Department of Health as well as the State of Wisconsin Department of Agricultural Trade and Consumer Protection. Both of those require an annual fee and a pre-inspection fee. It costs somewhere between $400 and $600 to get one of these started. It's already regulated through the state. The city has proposed in their conditional use permit that in their list, almost all of them were redundant to what the state has already, and it didn't even list all of the state requirements and regulations that are already through the state. So what we have now is we have the conditional use permit, which what they do is they come and apply for a permit, and then the neighbors all get a letter in the mail saying this is what Susan's doing down there. And then all the neighbors get all riled up because they have the worst imagination on what's going to happen and everything's going to be horrible, which is just human nature. But we discussed at length that I think, and I believe everybody that was here agreed that you would rather have a tourist rooming house next door to you than having a rental, which is not regulated at all. So, we had passed the conditional use permits with no conditions put on them. It should be just a normal regulated it's already regulated through the state and through the county. They get inspected every year, and there's permit fees with that. I don't think that the city should have additional conditions put on and additional fees put on as well to people that want to run a tourist rooming house and have their own business here in the city. So I think that pretty much sums up what's happened in the last 2 months. Each of them was passed with no conditions put on them. And we think it should be a permitted use, not a licensed use, just should be allowed.
Thank you. Go ahead, Susan.
I guess I'm confused about that. I thought that we, in Planning Commission, discussed that you could put conditions upon it. Particularly, I was concerned about the condition that when ownership changes, because a conditional use permit runs with the land, that we put a condition on it that if ownership changes, the new owner has to come back and renew that conditional use approval. And that, to me, was having heard the people in the audience and the concerns that they had, and thinking about the extreme differences that you can have in the care and management of a property by one owner or another, it seems to me an important condition that should be put on the property that if ownership changes, the new owner would have to come back and renew that conditional use, which I thought was the only way we could impose that requirement would be through a staff, a listing of staff recommendations and taking approval there too. Is that not correct, what we did?
I'm sorry, can I talk?
Go ahead.
Okay, what you are specifically talking to is already in the state statutes for tourist rooming houses, when ownership changes, that
You have to apply.
yeah, that has to be reapply, and they gotta go through the whole thing again. That's already taken care of. There's a lot in there, and you're right. It's an excellent thing to have, but it's already taken care of with the state regulations.
Mr. Chair, and to further this discussion, I think it's a good one that we're having, and maybe I don't see it as two parties, but our government working better and not creating more bureaucracy in that sense. But Kyle, could you descriptively describe what conditions we had? Because I thought that there was one in there with the 6 months, where we would do a 6-month review from community development, but I'm struggling to understand if there was any conditions like Alderperson Delaney is describing that differ from the state.
Yeah, so I think the ones that would differ from the state are the registered agent. So it was requiring somebody to essentially register with the city that was owning and operating it.
And be within 5 miles
correct.
of the city limit. Okay, that was a restriction or condition.
But is that already in your, isn't that already a requirement?
Is that within the state statute right now, or is that
It
not?
I cannot confirm. Yeah, I cannot confirm if it is or not. So the other difference is, right, having municipal knowledge of it. Typically, you know, the county is working in its own bubble, and the city's working in its own bubble. So unless there's a major issue, that's really the only time that one would talk to the other about an issue. Also, having it locally regulated, we have the ability to act if there is some sort of issue with, you know, repeat, you know, police code violations or other violations, building violations. We can review the conditional use permit and potentially revoke it.
On that line of scenario, would we currently, if we were to create and go down this path of following the state and abolishing this or creating an ordinance without these conditional permits, what action as a government agency would we have in limiting the use of a tourist rooming house at a parcel?
So if it's a permitted use, it still has to meet all the normal zoning code regulations. That could be separate supplemental standards under the definition, which again, as proposed, there would be no supplemental standards. So really, they'd still have to meet for a residential use the parking requirements. They also have to meet our police department code of ordinances. They have to meet our property maintenance code of ordinances. So we do have protections in place. If there's noise or garbage or rubbish or parking on the grass, we can, you know, ticket them and follow up and abate certain things. But in terms of the use specifically, we would be limited if it's listed as permitted to revoke or stop the use. If they're issued, you know, fines for parking on the grass or rubbish and garbage, once they clean it up,
that's the extent.
The use, the use can continue. We would just, you know, have some protections, I guess, to prevent those type of violations. The other conditions we placed upon them, to get back to your original question, was building inspector inspection, and to Susan's point, the transfer on sale or change of ownership, as well as the 6-month review. Those were added conditions that Plan Commission had placed on them beyond the supplemental standards.
Yeah, and I guess for me is kind of swayed or changed my opinion was I can turn my house into a rental, and I can take you around. And we've all seen rental properties in this community. But if I turn my house into a tourist rental or a tourist rooming house, my objection is to rent out my property. And so by having, you know, online, whichever you call them, yeah, you know, when you go online, reviews. The reviews themselves are going to help dictate and control the property. Because if you have bad reviews, I'm not going to, you know, nobody's going to rent my house if there's a lot of bad reviews. But I have no requirements as a landlord or a property owner. And it's the same thing, you know, if there's a problem at a rental property, yeah, we have to go through all the same processes, deem it as a nuisance, pay city staff to spend a lot of time to then eventually send trucks over there with skid steers to clean up the yards. You know, that's no different here. But if I have a tourist rooming house, I'm going to make sure I have a nice property because I want it to be rented out, or I want people to go online to rent my property. A rental, the landlord doesn't. Sometimes I don't think they care as long as they get their rent. But my objection with a tourist rooming house is to rent it out. And that's what kind of swayed me into believing that, you know, I think with like Patrick, you know, over-regulating, being redundant on what another agency is already doing, or, you know, with our condition on the sale of it. Well, even on the sale of it, the new owner still has to apply, still has to get a license through the county and the state and go through that process. So that review is happening. And I just don't see over-regulating it really necessary. That's my opinion.
I just had a question for Mr. Delaney. I know you had mentioned that the health department or Wood County would do an inspection. Is that just a health department inspection, or would that be separate than like the building that the city would do? What are they inspecting for?
I had talked with I had talked with the, boy, I can't remember, I think it was Karen, if I remember right, over at the health department, and she said, we spent probably 5 minutes going over all the different things that they inspect. They inspect the smoke alarms, the laundry services, well water, if that's applicable. They inspect the dishwasher, make sure that the dishwasher is something with the dishwasher. I don't know. Right down to the silverware, plates, and glasses and stuff like that. And that, you know, we had talked, it was a few months ago when I had talked to her. So I don't remember everything that she had said, but it's a very extensive list of what they inspect.
And
I would imagine that they would also inspect the house to make sure that the house is there's no mold or something like that in it. I mean, that would just make sense to me if you're sending out somebody to inspect the health to make sure that it's a healthy home to stay in.
And that was yearly?
Yeah, every year it gets inspected.
Okay. And then Kyle, is that something that we could just talk to them and ask them for like an updated list every once in a while so the city knows if that's a concern to someone? But
Yeah, we can certainly, I mean, right now, when this became kind of a topic of discussion, we went on all the websites, and so we've got a list of current operators within the community, and the anticipation moving forward was to maintain that, so maybe every 6 months, go back on those websites and maintain the list. If, again, we're not regulating them, or we're limiting our regulation, I think we can still reach out to the county just to say, hey, how many do you have, where are they operating?
so there's a list somewhere. If there's a problem, we can go look for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Kyle, can you speak to the difference in inspections from state to what would be done on the city level?
Yeah, on the city level, we'd be looking at more code issues in terms of the Uniform Dwelling Code for 1 and 2 family occupancies. So you're looking at safe ingress, egress, you're looking at proper room size, ceiling height, any other, exposed wiring when it comes to electrical, other safety concerns from a building standpoint, whereas I think the county health department is looking for more of the health and safety as it relates to, food and the operation of the use, hygiene, things of that nature, not necessarily related to the building itself. And I think that's an important component, and I think that's why, as staff, we probably lean more towards having that inspection and regulation, because very similar to a hotel, when somebody constructs a hotel, we've got a commercial inspector that's going in there to make sure that all the commercial codes applicable to that occupancy type are being met. And so as a patron that's, at that hotel, right, they're staying at that facility knowing, and most of them don't think about it, but right, knowing that it's a safe place to stay, there aren't hazards to their health with regards to the building. And so I think in fairness, applying that same protection to these residential establishments that are offering a similar service to transients is fair. And again, that's why I think we'd lean more towards, if you're adopting this ordinance amendment, to maybe consider still having a license in the licensing chapter to ensure that protection for the building.
So Kyle, when we build a house in Rapids, do we have to have inspectors inspect it?
A house?
A house.
That's correct, yes.
So how is that any different than a commercial building, or does a hotel get a yearly inspection to make sure there's no wires hanging out or things that happen within that year? Because obviously, if I build a house, I had it inspected. If I do an addition, I have it inspected. So my house has already been inspected, no different than a hotel. But we want to require residential properties to get a re-inspection, but we're not going back and inspecting hotels every year commercially.
Correct. I think the difference is, a lot of times first, fire department is in there doing inspections annually for those type of uses. And then most of the time in commercial, for change of use, if you have a retail going to a restaurant, there's some sort of addition or there's some sort of permit required because the occupancy type has changed. Yep. and thus have the codes and ordinances that are applicable to that occupancy type under the commercial code, or in this case, the UDC, the residential code. So most of the time in change of occupancy, we're in the building for some reason or another, or the fire department is. And a lot of times if the fire department's in the building and they see electrical issues or they see something related to the building, they'll let us know, and we'll bring it to the owner or occupant's attention and try to get it addressed, because it would be then a code violation. But you're correct in that, yeah, we don't inspect, after a house has been built, we don't inspect a residential home or a rental. The only thing that we inspect now are rooming houses that are existing. So a house that may have existed for decades and has 5 rooms and they've got 2 occupants in each room, we do require a license and an inspection annually for those. So again, in fairness also, I think this is very similar. The difference here is those might be more permanent, this more transient, but still it's a rooming house.
But if such as if I change my house to a rental, I'm changing the use, but there's no inspection.
Correct.
Yeah, to me, I just think it becomes redundant. Go ahead, Dan.
I've been through quite a few inspections through the state with owning the adult family homes, and they do check electrical, and they check doors, and they check everything that you can think of. So I can't imagine that. To me, talking with the health department, it seemed like they did even more than what they do on our adult family homes, and we do that. I mean, they've got a list, and we go through them. So it takes probably 3-4 hours for each house.
Any other questions, comments? Your wishes?
So I'll get it going, but as long as the things that are concerned to us are being covered in different areas, I guess I'll make a motion to approve these changes.
Would you entertain the motion with a license to just be registered on file as recommended?
I guess they're kind of two separate things. I guess we pass this change, and then or I guess you can pass it pending it, or I don't know how you want to word that.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise if it's an ordinance amendment to make it conditional upon anything. I think if there's the concern to license or provide a license, that would go to legislative committee, and then they would make a recommendation to council on whether or not they want to include a license. You can certainly instruct staff, and we'll do our best to adopt a license and bring that back to legislative committee, but I don't think adopting an ordinance with a condition tied to it is appropriate. Unless it's like pertains to that ordinance and that section of code, and it's a change, addition, or removal.
Good, Susan.
There was not. I was just asking if Mr. Dobbin wanted to include that, and I was educated on how
I
it
can
should
second it.
May I then ask a question?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Or make a comment. We struggle with these conditional uses in so many different formats, and it's a frustration to me personally to have voted yes to give someone a conditional use permit to do something, and then to turn around and find that they have violated it in so many different ways, and we have a minimum amount of opportunity or capability to go out and correct that violation. And in some cases, it's very public, and it's an embarrassment, I think, for us to overlook that. If we are going to make rules of a certain nature, then I think that the rules should be followed up on, and people who violate them should have their conditional use pulled or a correction made for whatever the violation is. And I am frustrated that we can't seem to get that done. If we now do something like this, we essentially absolve ourselves of any opportunity to take action because we say, well, then the state should do it, or the health department should do it. And we don't have any handle on correcting the situation that really should be corrected. I guess that's not a question, is it?
Comments fair. So any other discussion?
I think just part of the discussion, I think what staff had on there, the license would cover an agent, room tax, and inspection. So the room tax is already covered through the state, and the inspection, not a building inspection, but an inspection. So the only thing a license would cover would be to have a local agent on file with the city. That generally,
Well, and they'll be, you know, may not be the registered agent that's in charge of managing the facility, but if the owner is paying the room tax, you know, we'll have somebody on file, or a registered agent for an LLC that owns the building in the assessor's office. What this does is, I guess, if that owner or agent differs that's managing the facility, it allows us to have that contact, and allows us to maybe respond to any issues that arise sooner, especially if there's an LLC that has a, you know, a registered agent down in Arizona. This would give us a local contact for somebody to call if there's an issue.
I still thought that a registered person has to be within a certain distance. What's that? Yeah, I thought that was already part of it.
A part of the state
Correct.
regulations? Okay.
That's the way I understood it. That's the way you understand it too. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or comments? Seeing none. Let's try, yeah, I think we did, didn't we? Yeah, I thought.
Yeah,
we did.
5:30,
Yeah.
and closed at 5:31.
Yeah, it was really, yeah, it was a
Yep.
1 minute. All right, so I guess let's all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
No.
So the motion carried. And I'll obviously go to council for discussion. With that, we're at item number 9, adjournment. And we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, thank you, everybody.